Amanda Brady. I'm the president of the South Australian chapter of NAWIC. So thank you all for coming here today. I'd like to just begin by acknowledging the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Now, on behalf of the NAWIC South Australian chapter, I'd like to take a minute to recognise our annual sponsors. Without our sponsors who contribute a lot to us throughout the year, we wouldn't be able to hold events like this. So I'd like to say a special thank you to our gold sponsor, Lendlease, silver sponsors, Built, Shape, Micra, Enovan, Sarah Constructions, Tandem, Hames Charlie and Roussos Recruitment, and our bronze sponsors, Cal Clark Lawyers, Zenith, Walker Corporation, Built Environs, Alexander Simons, TBH Consultancy and Sitzler. Now, a special thanks, of course, also goes to the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network for partnering with NAWIC today, and of course to Ken Long personally. I'll say a bit more about Ken in a minute. Now, most of you know that NAWIC South Australia is actually run by a council and committee that volunteer their time. We all do it because we're passionate about NAWIC, its values and the significant contribution that it makes to the construction and related industries. Now, today was put together by one of our newest council chairs, Sophia Genders, who's here, and she's done an excellent job in selling out her first event. Well done, Soph. And also with the help of Bianca too, who's around here somewhere. So thank you both. Now it's time for you to hear from some other very important and inspiring people that we've got here today. I'd like to thank you all for volunteering your time. It's greatly appreciated. Now I'd like to introduce Ken Long, our facilitator, who's then going to introduce our excellent panel. Ken is the Regional Sustainability Manager, South Australia and Victoria for Lendlease and a recognised advocate for sustainable built environments. With qualifications in architecture, sustainable design and ecologically regenerative design, high achiever, Ken facilitates a holistic system thinking approach to design problems. Ken's professional experience traverses organisational sustainability and net zero advisory and technical sustainable design consultancy for developments of all scales. Now, this includes carbon accounting, business ESG strategy, project design optimisation, building performance simulation, biophilic design integration, green building ratings, and life cycle analysis. Wow, impressive.
I'm sorry that the long bio was applied to you.
I've gone with the long one. Yep, all good. Alongside his professional career advancement, Ken is very active in advocating for sustainable built environments within the South Australian development and design industry. As the chairperson of the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, Ken helps facilitate opportunities for professionals and the general public to engage with concepts of sustainable design and be inspired to implement them. Please welcome Ken.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's greatly appreciated. And on behalf of the Adelaide Sustainable Building Network, I also want to pay my respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the Adelaide Plains. And acknowledging that sometimes just passing on a little bit of your knowledge of place goes a long way. And I want to recognize that we are very well within the realm of Tanganyika, which is a very special place for the Kaurna people. It's known as the gymming place of the red kangaroo. And from what I've heard Kaurna elders speak of this place, it's a place where many generations of knowledge share has happened all throughout life here in now known as Adelaide. And we hope that the ASBN and also, of course, NAWIC and any other advocacy group continues on that legacy of Tanganyika, to be able to be a place of learning, sharing, experience, and ways forward. And under that, I also want to be able to say thank you so much to the NAWIC leadership as well as all the council members, because from the ASBN standpoint, we always feel that collaboration is key to be able to create really good advocacy. And we are thrilled to be having this collaboration with your network, and we hope it's just the foundations of something that we can continue on and on into the future as we both advocate for lots of positive things into the future in our respective industries. But another thanks go to all of you showing up today. We really appreciate you all coming along with a bit of interest in this conversation around decarbonizing the building sector, and what does that mean for us in practice, but also, where did we come from, how are we here, and what are things we can kind of do in the future. And part of the for what I like to describe myself as a hippie in a suit. And for someone like myself with a lot of areas of sustainability that a lot of us might be wrestling with in our professional lives or trying to figure out, or even promoting, I think it's a long time coming. So anything you guys have to do in your projects, I'm just like, but not everyone thinks that way around this whole thing around decarbonization, right? But at the end of the day, even South Australia, as an economic policy, decarbonization is one of the 3 main areas that South Australia is banking on from our prosperity, so to speak, even from an economic standpoint. So, hey, for those of us that always have to make sure things stack up in a financial way, this is also helping us get there. But with teeing up that little bit of context, we have some fantastic folks here on the panel today, and to share their experience as well as knowledge and wisdom. And but first of all, I do know we have a couple of mothers on the panel today. So want to be able to make sure we give a shout out to all the mothers after a Mother's Day weekend. So whoop to all the mothers out there. Pew, pew. Raise your hands in the air like you just don't care if you a mom. Yes, that's called pandering to the people. Just kidding. So just to kind of get things going here, rather than me introducing you, I know that all of you are way more capable of introducing yourselves. And so I'm going to put you to the task to do that, mainly because one of the things that I appreciate the most about going to NAWIC events is learning about people's career trajectory. How did they get there? What were they doing? What were their interests? And there might not be a lot of opportunities to really think about people that engage or push sustainability in their workplace. So I was wondering if we can kind of go around the grounds, get a little bit of insight, where'd you come from? What'd you do? What led you to this spot of actually what's like a little quick trip around the arc of your career and getting involved with built environment decarbonization? We can start anywhere. Right from Lena. Here we go. Oh, let me just check if it's on. Here we go.
Hello.
Yep.
Hello. Thank you so much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here today. So my career started a little bit far away from here. I'm from Colombia, where I did my studies as an environmental engineer. I worked there as environmental and sustainability manager for a few years for a large logistics company before moving to Australia about 11 years ago. And I think that's where my career started in Australia. I did a master's in Melbourne University in environmental engineering with focus on renewable energy. And there, while I was studying, I did an internship at Victoria Zoos, which is nothing related to the built environment, but it was really fun. When I finished my master's degree, I moved to Sydney, and I started working for New South Wales government. They had a program called the Energy Efficient Business Program. So I worked there for a few years, and then decided that I wanted to move to the private sector, and I worked for a company called AMP Capital back in the day, now Dexus, and stayed there for a few years. I started in ESG a bit more in the financial sector there, and now I am in Charter Hall. I lead the ESG function for the office sector at Charter Hall. So yeah, that's my short story.
Brilliant, fantastic, and it's amazing to hear sort of going from engineering, technical, and then going into policy and finances. Yep. Yeah. So it probably wasn't as planned as you thought. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic.
Some parts were planned. My moves from public to private.
Yep.
But some others were luck and hard work.
Yeah. We all need a little bit of that, don't we? Who's next? Thank you so much, Lena. Oh, Deb, you got the magic mic.
I also started further away from here, although not quite as exotic as Lena. So I'm Deb Davidson from D Squared. Grew up in Scotland, studied at Edinburgh University, and arrived in Sydney just after the Sydney Green Olympics. So arrived in 2002. It seems like a long time ago now. I had a degree in geography and I thought, this sounds interesting. I want to get involved in sustainable buildings. I had no work experience. I sort of knocked on doors around Sydney whilst doing some temp jobs and basically begged anyone to give me some experience. And I started working with an engineering company in Sydney who didn't have an environmental team. They employed me for 3 months to write some environmental plans, and then went on to work in Sydney in that space for, I think, 6 years. Worked on one of the first Green Star projects in the country, just when the Green Building Council was all kicking off, and that's sort of what got me from geography into sustainable buildings. Then moved to Adelaide and worked for a national ESD consultancy in Adelaide for a number of years before setting up D Squared. Some of you probably know that I know Ken from a long time, a long history of working together, both initially at Cundall, think of your first job out of university, and at D Squared as well in his earlier part of his career. So D Squared's now been going for 13 years. We're based in Adelaide. Our head office is down here on Rundle Street, and yeah, we get to work on some pretty excellent projects here and also nationally.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Deb. And yes, we definitely do go way back. So thank you very much for a lot of my financial stability in life. Ruth, got the mic?
Thank you. So my name is Ruth Nordstrom. Currently, I work with the Australian Institute of Architects. And I come from a background that crosses over architecture, education, now policy. I am a mum. I'm wearing my Mother's Day bracelets. I was told not to take them off, so they're on. And so my career has kind of been formed by a lot of little things that I've done, not just in my career, but in my life as well. So I studied here at UniSA, Adelaide, born and bred, so very close. Grew up down the beaches in nature, and I studied architecture, not wanting to actually be inside buildings, which sounds very, very strange, but then met the likes of people like Ken, who started teaching me about biophilic design and, being more sustainable. So upon graduating university, I really looked towards building my sustainability knowledge and freelanced for a little bit because I found at that time there wasn't a great deal of opportunity for graduates that wanted to develop that knowledge. Rather, they would just sit on computers and be a cat monkey. And now I'm seeing, these inspiring women and men, but I see one woman over there in the crowd who's now taking on roles as sustainability managers for their practices, and it's really rewarding now jumping into the Institute of Architects because I don't like public speaking, as Ken knows, but I'll do it if I have to, just because I like being able to uplift others, and a lot of the projects that I've been very, very fortunate to be on, I've just been, in the right time, right place, been able to jump on them and find a group of people that I can use as tools to support a wider industry. That's been really rewarding. And then, that obviously leads into my personal life as well. And I've got 2 kids that preach sustainability to me, and actually driving through the city the other day, my son was asking questions about the facades on buildings. So I'm like,
That's
You've
called
been
brainwashing.
listening. Yeah, it is brainwashing. Brainwashing. Yeah. Young mind washing, but no, it's good because that to me shows that there's so many young minds that need nourishing. I learnt from my education degree in particular that minds don't fully form until they're 25 years old in some cases. So there's a lot of work that can be done through the graduate networks in particular to really have strong graduates coming through with the skills that we need that can do a bit of accounting. Architecture is not all about the glitz and the glam and fancy buildings. It's about the place that you make for people. And so now in the Institute of Architects, able to use all of that knowledge and network with other people, industry to put the right people in the right place. Speaking to ministers about what policy needs to change. We've had a couple of discussions already coming into this room tonight, particularly around the land release and the housing sector and what's not being done. So it's nice to be a conversation piece that we're all engaged in, and actually to be able to take the opinions of members and people like I meet tonight into those meetings with the ministers. Yeah.
Barracking for all of us then, Ruth.
I am. Always.
Fantastic. And thank you very much for that. And also reinforcing that my mind's already set. So surprise, I'm over 25 years old. Emma, please.
Thank you. Hello, my name's Emma Clark, and I'm a design manager at Built. I did set out to be a ballet dancer, and it didn't quite turn out like that. So I did that for a while and then decided to study architecture, and I practiced for over 15 years before taking the leap into construction. And that's been very rewarding, and I think quite invigorating, actually, being on the ground, solving problems, and working and advocating for design. And this, the last 3 years, I've been working on this building that we sit in today, so look around. And I think this is a 6-star Green Star building and a WELL Platinum rating and Neighbours IE, energy, water, etc. So faced with delivering a building with all those aspirations, I went on a quick accelerated upskilling, became a Green Star AP and a WELL AP, and just started to deliver this building over the course of time. And I think that's just how things have developed. And obviously since 2020, when this was tendered, there's been a massive growth and change within the industry, which I'm sure we're about to get into and talk about. So
Indeed.
yeah.
Yep. And a lot of similarities between buildings and ballet as well, you reckon?
There's more than you would imagine.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. But thank you so much for all of you for just taking us to the arc of your career. There's so many things that we can kind of learn. And of course, I'm continuously inspired by everyone's stories. So thank you so much for giving us an insight into that. So look, the way that I'll continue the panel is actually, we have a few questions to kind of get around and get a little bit of context around decarbonization in the built environment. But we also want to make sure there's ample time for Q&A. So I just wanted to let y'all know that there will be times for that. So get those ready. But yeah, going on to some of the questions that we just want to kind of pass around to be able to get a little bit more context. If it's okay, I could start with you, Lena. And it's more around setting the scene of ESG. You know, we hear it everywhere. It feels like everyone's kind of talking about it, from politics to financing and even in built environments. So could you please give us a bit of insight of what it means, but also how it drives policy investment, and then how does that go into development? And especially, why is it so important for leaders like Charter Hall?
Thank you. It's like a five-part question. I'm gonna try to remember all of it. So ESG, as you probably all know, stands for environmental, social, and governance. It was it has been used for in the financial sector for a long time, and it's mostly been used to assess or evaluate companies' performance on how the investments are doing. So it is now becoming really popular, and is a little bit sometimes confused with sustainability or a synonym of sustainability, even though they are a little bit different. ESG is really financial driven and is the criteria that investors use to assess performance on their investments. It has become more and more prominent because in the past few years, investors, insurers, and the financial sector in general realize that climate change is a risk. And ESG, not only climate change, but ESG in general, poses a risk to their investments and to their assets, meaning that now they are looking at companies through the lens of what is your ESG risk. So that has, of course, translated into companies being more and more active in tackling climate change, social issues, governance issues as well. And for Charter Hall, we manage investors' money, basically. So that means for us it's front of mind. If our investors care about ESG, we will care about ESG. Is front of their mind for not only investor but also for government, with more and more regulation coming on carbon emissions, on disclosure, mandatory disclosure on climate change. Then it has become the center of attention, I guess, for the past 5 years or so, but more so in the past, I guess 3 years, it really has become prominent. And finally, the decarbonization is a key way to de-risk your investment. So there is a general consensus that we are moving to a low carbon economy, and if you have an investment that is not aligned with a low carbon economy, then you have some sort of risk. So that means that decarbonizing, especially the building sector that has the tools and the technology to do so, is key, and it shouldn't be delayed.
Just to also kind of tease out a little bit of that, you mentioned a lot around financial risk, and of course, financial and possibly legal risk helps sway a lot of people in the development sector. But can you also talk to whether better ESG performance also relates to better financial return? Is that taken into consideration with investors?
It has been shown that usually companies with better ESG credentials perform better, are more resilient to change, which is a key, I think, characteristic of an asset. There will be changes, there will be cycles, and good ESG makes a company or an asset more resilient to those unpredictable changes. So not all the time, but usually better ESG means, for example, for this building, with better ESG credentials, we are able to secure better tenants, longer leases. We are able to provide better environment. There are a bunch of benefits that come along with that.
So it's a lot of translating to good outcomes, creates good economic outcomes for most situations. So.
Yes.
Yeah, but thank you so much for giving us that little bit of insight into ESG. I know sometimes it can be conflated, but I really appreciate sort of like the context of how it fits into a lot of financial decisions that are kind of made. And I just wanted to move over to Deb in line with that, because we've seen how ESG has sparked a lot of changes in terms of how considerations are probably being down or taken a little bit more seriously, and the things that we've probably been in the realm of consulting. But the fortune of having someone like you on the panel is you're one of the most decorated people in the realm of sustainable design in Australia. And it's great to have people like you here in South Australia driving those kind of conversations for lots of key projects in this place. So with that sort of, I guess, career, long-term career in sustainability, could you provide us a little bit of insight on how the conversation has changed? Because we're talking about like, oh, in the last like 3 to 5 years, it's kind of like skyrocketed. But this is a conversation that's been going on for a bit of time, and you've been at the helm of driving that conversation. And of course, I always like to have 5-part questions, maybe sometimes 10. So alongside of describing what you've seen has changed, what do you think now becomes our key facet of decarbonization that needs the attention now? So give us a little bit of pass, and then what do you think we got to go for now?
All right, I'll try to remember all of that. You might need to help me along the way.
All of y'all on the panel have big brains. You definitely can remember.
It's interesting having just heard about the considerations for ESG and how it stands at the present, and reflecting back. I feel like the money is always important. I suppose back in the early days when I first started in sustainable design, the focus was probably mostly on energy efficiency, and how did we convince clients that they needed to consider energy efficiency? It was normally around how can we save you money? And of course, if you can save money and also get some environmental good, then that was a great way to start conversations. Often it was a challenge, trying to convince clients to put double glazing in a project. Back in the early days of my career, certainly we had big debates that revolved around, we don't have the budget for double glazing, we don't have the budget for the shading, and so it was working on energy efficiency primarily. And the other side of it that I always reflect back on in my early career, I feel like in building design, it was all about the conversation was about how do we do less harm to the environment. Not really considering people much, I don't think, back in my early career. It was more about how do we not harm the environment. So things like stormwater management plans or water conservation. It was about how to save money and how to not harm the environment. And policy played a big part. So a lot of the early Green Star projects that I worked on were for government. It was driven by policy. It wasn't driven so much by individual organizations or corporations. I think where the conversation has changed so much over the years is the driver has changed from doing less harm to how can we start to do more good. I think maybe 10 years ago or so, the conversation started to move more to people and thinking about people in buildings and how could we create spaces that were better for people's health and well-being, better indoor environment quality. And some of those discussions obviously don't relate so much to cost, although you can start to look at things like increased productivity, decreased absenteeism, and start to monetize that. And certainly when the International Building Institute came around, there's quite a lot of conversation about cost again and the cost benefits there. But I think then broadening into other ways to do environmental good around bringing in conversations about nature. Ken and I certainly had very many discussions about biophilic design, and I still have some of the images that we used to gather to try to talk to clients about why it was important to have nature in buildings. And, I always think back to my degree in geography and how, to me, that was so obvious. Like you say about growing up outdoors, I always thought, well, if we spend all of our time in buildings, let's make them as healthy and nice as possible. So yeah, I feel like the conversation is changing and evolving, and this most recent change towards ESG and risk has just helped to accelerate that. And I think it's amazing. If we can keep using the money to do good, then that works really well for us. I didn't work on this building. It's the first time I've been in here. So it's really nice to see another great building being built in Adelaide, where you've got Green Star well becoming business as usual now at this end of the scale. And I think there's a lot of leaders out there doing really great things, and we can use the leaders and some of the big firms that are doing great things in the ESG space to help bring up and educate everybody else. And I think one thing that I always think, and I think I'm getting better at as I get older, is that we're all on this journey together, and there's no right answers when it comes to sustainable design. It's hopefully continues to evolve, and we'll keep learning as we go forward. Does that fully answer that
Oh,
question?
for sure, for sure. But what's the one kind of thing that you think is getting the most attention?
Earlier this year, I was at the Green Building Council's event up in Sydney at Transform. The thing that was getting the most attention there was looking, I think there was a general acceptance that in that sector of the market that we've accepted climate risk is a real thing and we need to respond. And the focus was much more on nature and how buildings and the development world, I suppose, buildings, precincts, master plans, how we can actually, how our industry can interact better with nature, and how the nature-related risk is a really big issue for the future. How that translates into our day-to-day projects, I think, is still to be seen. And I think it's probably an example of how we're all learning together. You know, you're working on an individual building. How can you use that project to influence nature? So I think there's a lot more thought to how can we connect, how do we think about precincts and communities rather than individual projects, and also to things like things like biodiversity offsets, and how can, even in a city landscape, if we can integrate nature into the city, that's great, but how do we also improve other areas through some of these biodiversity offsets?
Indeed. Oh, thank you very much, Deb. Love that one. It's kind of thank you for reminding us that we are currently in the realm of twin crises of climate change, but also biodiversity loss, and they kind of compounded each other. So once again, where I'm going is that there's a lot of financial triggers that are kind of like being evaluated on how they do that. But it also goes on quite next, because I want to get Emma involved in the conversation here, because part of that setup is like, how do we actually do it? And working for a head contractor, you're sort of on the hook to deliver.
Yes.
Right. And so I wanted to get your perspective around, do you think sustainability requirements have become easier or harder? The reason why I say that is because even though it might be uptick, like you just said, you did a vigorous upskilling on things. So maybe that's why I wanted to ask the easier or harder question. But also, how do you think our construction industry has figured out some things, and our supply chain has figured out some things? And, do you think those things, like being able to figure out a bit as we're working on projects, do you think it will lead us toward better outcomes and, decarbonization, nature, and those kind of aspects?
Yeah. Lots of parts of the question again. So, but I think obviously I'm coming as a head contractor. I'm not a sustainability specialist, but I'm on the ground and with a direct sphere of influence over like 400 subcontractors, and we have to try and corral all these disparate groups to deliver what the client and aspirations have been set out. So it's quite hard, but it's a great thing, and it's very satisfying when it does all come together. But as we all know, like you set them at the beginning of a project back in 2020 or even before, and you see the project through, and then suddenly it's 2024, and that bar that was set back then is now being raised a lot higher. So we've spent 3 years educating this big group of people, and everyone's on board. But then we have to say, hang on, now we've got to keep moving up, which is great, but it's a continual cycle of education for me, and then passing it down, which is all part of the thing. But I think that's a good thing. Then I think this case in point is a good example, because the client's aspirations are aligned potentially with us in the room, where they are set at the beginning of a project, but of course not all projects are like that, and there are lots that don't have those aspirations, and then that's where there's a real it's a real clash, and then there's questions of cost and motivations, and how do we get those sort of projects to actually come along for the journey. I think, yeah, and then this building, we were looking at electrification as an operational outcome, and now the conversation has moved far beyond that. Having said that, we did have opportunity in the DNC early days to rationalise structure, pull out materials, and that part of decarbonisation, I think we started to precipitate, but now we could move it forward further to modularity and design for disassembly, and we can start to really with the client leading and setting the tone. I think then there's lots more opportunity for the builder to be involved and engaged and to educate a really broad range of people and supply chains. Yeah.
And I really enjoy that perspective, because as you were describing it, I just see this image of the goalpost being moved,
Yes,
or like
constantly.
the if you're jumping over, the high jump, it just continues to go higher and higher. I wanted to ask if that was fair, but it's probably not about what's fair or not. We're just adjusting to the times. But where do you see opportunities in, like, let me bring that back. What have you seen that works at getting the contractors in our supply chain much better equipped to kind of get these lofty quality outcomes?
Yeah. Well, like I say, it helps to have a few contracts in place. Let's face it. But I think we Built has a very strong sustainability outcome and team, and we're always looking to try and push those goals. But the momentum is certainly accelerated if we have that client input. But I think we can do a lot of things. Like, we can set up our sites, electrify our sites, and look like that necessarily may not have an impact. And I think there's a lot of things that you can do that may not have a price, and then so they're a no-brainer. But then there are some things that you might need to consider and weigh up with the client's input or the subcontractors input as to which direction you might go. And so there's a few things there. I think there's a lot more education in supplier documentation now, so I think it's easier to evaluate, particularly in concrete and steel. But there's a few things that are still quite opaque in the facade kind of region, where we really don't have as much information as we would like, but that will continue to become more available.
Yeah, you are right. I think the transparency of the industry has come a really long way. And I guess, like you said, it is about understanding what is being told through that transparency, and how do we leverage that to create a lot of better decisions. So yeah, thank you very much for that reflection as well. And of course, y'all have threaded the needle beautifully through all these questions. So thank you very much for setting them up. But Emma did mention quite a bit around education. And Ruth, you're actually helping a whole industry kind of wrestle with what's the best practice in architecture, and potentially what's the professional duty of care within architects. So could you give me some insight on how the architecture profession is addressing the need for climate responsive built environments, and how that supports our trajectory to a decarbonized economy?
Yeah, sure. There's so many different things that I could give you as example today, and it can be hard for the Institute because we represent 14,000 members, all with different views. Some have increased focus on operational carbon, and that's their bread and butter. Others have been doing embodied carbon for the last 20, 30 years without knowing it sometimes. So it's interesting trying to mesh the old with the new. I remember at a place that I worked discussing with one of the practice managers that all he needed to know was, what's the new language that this needs to be put in. You're talking about energy savings, you're talking about saving materials, using materials from site. Well, let's transform that into a different language. This is the word for it now. And there's a lot of that going on so that we can get members to build their confidence and sell the idea at the front, which we're seeing a lot of change in a lot of the projects that are being done. The awards now have very strict criteria, and it's getting more and more strict. The members are about to find that out soon. But then we've also got other areas that have been worked on that are a little bit invisible, and that's in the policy space, because we have a lot of members that volunteer an awful lot of their time and attend the technical workshops with NatHERS, with ABCB, neighbours and so forth. And what we're doing there is really taking all of these learnings from, the many studies, like we've cited, D squared's work, of course, to try to emphasise what needs to happen in the economy. And, the classic example in SA was the ministers group discussing the NCC changes for 7-star, which is a no-brainer, and trying to dissect all of that misinformation that is happening that could just propel SA, way beyond all the other states and territories. We've got the energy systems here to do it. We've got the infrastructure. Infrastructure is such a huge cost burden and carbon burden to the economy. And if we can get more exemplar projects, such as these Green Star ones, by example, where it's more quantified, then we can transition the discussion from this tit-for-tat, responsive, reactive, to being proactive, and get out there and actually do the research. So now the approach that we're taking as a profession is bringing all these architects into research spaces where they can build up their ESG strategies. They can understand that, like currently, the GBCA's got a consultation on nature positive roadmap, which I highly recommend having a look at. And that brings in these financial considerations, real estate considerations. And if we can bring all of those messages through all our members into projects, then we've got a larger conversation that'll last, 20 years. So there's a lot of work in that space. We've recently had the National Architecture Conference as well, where we've implemented some more carbon targets, courtesy of our national committee. They're going to be quite hard to reach. Like you were saying, we're going to put them out there. There's going to be a freak out moment, I'm sure. But now we're working on, we've got the base layer in our embodied carbon curriculum, and now we're going to slot all of those little pieces in. So I guess in my role, I've just got to ask people to just take a breath, take a moment, don't freak out. We're here. And, what are you missing? Tell us, and we'll slot it in. We'll work a way to, work with Engineers Australia and AILA and all of those to slot those pieces in together. And I think that's probably where the government is also seeing the role of architects, because they do liaise with a whole lot of different consultants, including First Nations consultants. And if they can bring all of that information back into the brief at the front end, then, you've got precedent after precedent. Some of these larger projects are like rubber stamped briefs. So areas that we do struggle in are projects where the brief is set, 10 years ago, and they're trying to reach a certain target by a certain date, which is exactly the point that you've touched on, which is interesting. And you'll even notice in the GBCA Climate Positive Roadmap, they have the star ratings of what you need to achieve by, let's say, 2030. So it's important to get those messages out now, get them in the briefing, get the governments to put them in their pre-tender packages so that the precedent is set. But we really need to rely on government agencies, I guess, to get on board, and then all the architects can assist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting sort of dilemma around like future-proofing briefs, if any. But kind of, I guess, if we have a lot of certainty around climate change being a risk, biodiversity loss as a risk, how do we factor those in? But thank you for one of the key takeaways probably tonight is sustainability. Don't freak out. Decarbonization. Don't
absolutely.
freak out. We can do this. And I'm going to pivot to Q&A from the field quite soon. So anyone who has a question, please make sure you make eye contact with me. But before we go into Q&A with our audience tonight, talking about we can do this, could y'all give us a little bit of flavor of some wins in the realm of decarbonization y'all have had recently? And I mean, that could even be through your personal life, but professional intel could be fantastic.
I think for us, we're getting more face time with the people that we need to be in front of, which is good because, say, 10 years ago when I started quite specifically in sustainability, the discussion was very one-sided, very much pushed in real estate and, financing sectors. So we didn't get, as you said, we didn't get to deviate from energy efficiency, but now we can do so much more in that space. So some of the wins are we're actually in front of those people. We're part of the discussion with government even before, consultations come out. And I think for the Institute, that was quite a big win because we were being left out, and then we'd, try to give an opinion during the construction phase that they're looking at, and it just didn't quite synergize everything. And probably the other win, yet to be released, but getting the Institute and the members on board with measurement. So the sustainability checklist is the first thing, it's like doing an ESD report, like it's something so simple, but if we measure against all these other targets, then that becomes almost like a ESD statement. Every single project's got an ESD statement that ties into ESG strategy, build your B Corp status. So I think transitioning the role of what practices do and architects as, the dictators of which direction they want to go is changing, and seeing that mindset change is really valuable, really rewarding.
Yeah, benchmarking to create consistency and stuff like that. So that's fantastic. Yeah. Any other kind of wins or?
I love it that Ruth had 2 wins because I've got 2 as well. So
we need all the wins,
but they both relate to speed. The first one I was reminded about by Emma talking about electrification. So I feel like that conversation moves so fast. It doesn't feel like that long ago that we were talking about you need to electrify buildings, and SA Health were saying, what do you mean we need gas in hospitals? How are we going to do this? And now the speed that from having that conversation to fully electric buildings ready and using our highly renewable grid, I just think has been amazing. And just a real example of how fast we can change when we need to. And the other one that you also made me think of again, Emma, was just the working with the construction industry around materials and embodied carbon. I feel like every day at the moment, I'm learning about new materials and suppliers that are bringing out a new product or a product that they've been pushing for a while, but now they're able to provide a comparable cost to make them actually realistic on projects. And I think that's really exciting. And it's fun to be working in a space where things are moving so fast that you feel like you're learning something new all the time, and you have to just keep asking questions because what you knew yesterday is not necessarily what's happening next.
Thank you. I think also 2 wins from me.
I asked y'all 2 questions every single time, so 2 wins is pretty good.
Just in case, I was prepared. So the first one is on renewable energy. We signed a power purchase agreement back in 2019, 2020. Which now means that all of our buildings are powered by renewable energy across Australia, which was really big effort to get there and get everyone at Charter Hall and the fund managers and development and operations and everyone on board with such a big contract was a really big win for the sustainability team. And then the second thing is Green Star. We committed to achieve 6-star Green Star for all new developments, which is
that's actually no minor feat going forward. Yeah, good work.
So that's a lot of work, and that means we are all electric. We've built all electric for a couple of years now, but that commitment will continue, and then we are also going to reduce our embodied carbon, the embodied carbon in the buildings that we develop significantly. So that's and again, those processes take very long time. There is a lot of consultation with ESD consultant, architects, suppliers internally to make sure that the targets we set are achievable, and that we are not putting investors at risk with those type of commitments. So that's big.
No, that's fantastic. Yep.
So a win. So I think one thing that we always ask, which is surprising for a builder, is can we build any less? And that is the best way to decarbonise. So using this building as an example, we've obviously not obviously, but we integrated floors 1 to 10 and 11 and 12 with the fit out. So we didn't build a warm shell. The tenant didn't come along, rip it out and build their own fit out. So that was obviously a massive carbon saving. And then the top 2 levels, we were contracted for a warm shell, but we actually handed it over as a cold shell. And then post PC, it was fitted out. I'm just Brenton's in charge of that. So so that was a good way too. And then a couple of the fit outs, the NAB fit out and the ASBN fit out, there was quite a focus on using existing furniture. You know, can we work with what we have? And I think there's going to be massive growth in that area, and that's a big design push from the architects' angle. And then as a D&C contractor, we can also work together with the design team to deliver that.
Yeah, and especially when you're thinking about like that circular economy aspect around just making sure things actually do have can survive their whole life.
Yes.
And actually get a lot of use out of that. It'd be interesting as because we need other subcontractors or businesses to be able to bring those solutions to us as well, to be able to actually realize those. But we heard so much winning. Do we have any questions out there from the field? Oh, we had a question right over here, and Ben's going to run the mic just so we can capture that.
Hi, my question is not specific, but it's more about what parts of the industry have been good with the uptake of sustainability or normalizing it, and what parts could do with a lot of improvement. Like architects in general, I think have been great. They've really pushed it in the design aspect, or that's what I'm aware of. But are there any others who've done well, or who could do better?
Who's doing the best now?
Yeah.
You don't have to do specifics. You know. Yes.
Try.
Yeah.
We'll try. I think property in general has done a really good job in Australia because of benchmarking we have had for a while. Neighbours, Green Star have been a key tool for the property industry to become really competitive. So that means that we are one of the leaders in the world in Green Star, Neighbours, GRESB. So all of those benchmarking tools will really perform well. I cannot comment on who is. I think we all need to do better because we are still in this problem. So we all need to accelerate change. That's probably my point of view.
I'd also probably have a comment to the effect that there's not enough highlighting by the building sector about all the builders doing the right thing. There's some fantastic builders, like we've heard tonight, construction companies are actually doing the right thing. But then when it comes to the policy side of things and getting the policy in place, we're hearing from the associations all the bad things. You know, we can't do this, can't do that. And we're like, but it's right there. So like it's really interesting that the levers are there to be pulled, and it's, I guess, the will in some sectors is not. But I would tend to agree the property and real estate sectors have such a key role just for dramatic effect, have such a key role in getting this over the line. And you know, they're probably the ones that the ministers are mainly listening to as well, because of housing affordability and the housing crisis. You know, that's one thing. Commercial buildings are doing a fantastic job because they've had the policy in place. So now it's time to get all the existing buildings up to where they need to be. I think architects play a major role in that, and we're focusing on that quite heavily, because that's also a design process change and a practice change. Yeah, I think there are certainly sectors that are appearing like they're doing better than others. But yeah, I'd just caution on not assuming that one sector is not doing enough. I know that we are working quite heavily with the Master Builders of Queensland, and they have some issues with some members that are a bit outspoken. But then we also know the good work that they're doing, and they are providing, you know, a products traceability framework and things like that, which is crucial for this, you know, tracing products to and from site, existing products as well as they move around. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to find out more about that, I'm happy to put people in touch as well, and again, put people in the right spot if they want to. Yeah.
Indeed. Do we want to give any more shout outs to particular areas of the built environment, or just we all need to do better, like Lena mentioned?
I just had another quick example that I think it's interesting. The commercial sector has been really driving this for years. I think it's really interesting the other types of property that are now sort of getting on board. I've been doing a couple of projects recently. For years in my early career, I had a KPI to work on a retail project, and it just never happened. No one was interested. They didn't want to talk to us. And now I've been working with a couple of fashion retailers who want to get Green Star ratings because they want to align their corporate values around you know, slow fashion and recycling and reuse and materials with their stores that they're opening. And I think that's really fun. And we have questions like, you know, what is Green Star? What is low VOC paint? And it's like going back 20 years, but it's really nice to be educating and bringing other people on the journey as well.
Yeah, and everyone's at a different part of the journey, but nonetheless, it's all very important, right? I think we had a question in the back. Yep. Can we run this mic back?
Where was it?
Hi. This is about thinking about intangible benefits and how we measure that and weigh it up in a whole of life cost analysis. Are we using any metrics around this? I think maybe Charter Hall might, given that a healthy building promoting well-being has more longevity for tenancies. And I'm just wondering what sort of metrics are we using and how do we measure it in a whole of life cost analysis?
We use, we use different set of metrics for development, operational buildings, different but similar. We use similar frameworks. So across all of our assets, we use neighbors, energy, water, waste, and indoor environment. We also rate all of our buildings through Green Star. And then we cross that with financial performance to give us an idea of if higher ESG credentials mean longer lease terms, if they mean higher occupancy rates, higher satisfaction from tenants. So it's really good to use those established benchmarks and then kind of overlap with financial metrics, because that gives us an idea of a good building is going to attract tenants, is going to perform well, is going to deliver returns to investors, and it's a bit more tangible than, you know, other type of metrics. But at the same time, we have, of course, we know premium buildings usually perform really well because they are premium, but they couldn't be premium without the ESG credentials. So it's kind of a, you know, so yeah, we assess that throughout the life cycle. In design and in development, the metrics are similar. And yeah, it all overlaps again with financial performance of the asset. Does that answer your question?
Do we want to add anything to that? Yeah, Ruth, go ahead.
Just quickly as well, the consultation that I mentioned earlier with GBCA, we had a little session today with them. They are looking at also First Nations principles, so other intangible things to be included, but they want to do that as part of the consultation, so it's not just a token slap on, which is a great way to get the engagement. So I think they are specifically trying to work on that value proposition from the real estate sector, so that they can, houses or buildings can be sold with some sort of sense of place or sense of country. And, there's the Port Adelaide development that's happening as well, which a architect in Adelaide did. And even the Monarto one as well, that had great engagement with the First Nations people. And so you're getting a sense of those intangible qualities that bring community in, which I think is a really important thing. And I believe Living Future Institute also has some sort of measurement around that as well, which we're also trying to advocate to, have that included as a benchmark.
Indeed.
One thing that I wanted to add is we also, so the environmental side of the ESG is quite tangible, and we can measure it in terms of usually carbon. But the social is, I think, the next frontier. So when we go to measuring social value, that's when things get really, really difficult, because we can measure social value in many, many ways. It depends on the framework you use. PCA released a framework recently, but you can use, I think the social space is where we were maybe 20, 30 years ago in the environmental space. So that's why it's quite difficult to quantify benefits from social value creation. We do have some tools, but yeah, it's not as straightforward as with other benchmarks.
Is it on? My question's around this focus on ESG, and it's interesting with investors being so focused on this. Do you think public fund spending will be under more scrutiny by the community moving forward around this, or do you think it's a bit of a mystery generally to the public, general public?
Yes, it is. It is more front of mind for when you say investors. People usually think that investors is this big corporations, but it's us. We all have our investments in superannuation, which is the biggest investment of our life, and they are invested in companies like Charterhall. So we have a big duty of care to make sure that we, put the money and create assets that are going to create long-term value. So yeah, I think it is becoming more. It is an area of focus. We've seen recently, I think it was a couple of years ago, there was a lawsuit to one of the superannuation funds for not exercising the duty of care, which means they were invested in, all sorts of things. And the person who brought the lawsuit thought, well, this is not conducive to having long-term value from my investments in your company. So because of that, a lot of things change in the superannuation industry. So it is definitely one of the reasons why superannuation has become really, strict with their requirements around ESG.
Deb?
I was just going to also add to that, the ESG reporting, which at the moment is largely voluntary, will be starting to become mandatory. And that also includes government, I believe. And so I think that how government spends its money for people is going to be, there's going to be greater awareness, because they're going to have to be reporting on their environmental and social commitments. So I think that's going to be a really interesting space to watch. Also, just another thought related to that is just how the public do react and how things are changing over time. I know that in Europe, they're really looking at the term carbon neutral, because there have been some products that have been making carbon neutral claims that you can become carbon neutral through use of offsets, and that is sort of an approved way to do it. But it becomes I think the public understanding of that is challenging the way that we as an industry go about making these claims. And people are saying, well, hang on, how can that, I think it was a fuel in this case, be carbon neutral? It doesn't make sense. So I think that sort of the public are starting to come on the journey more and more and question what industry is doing and what claims are being made.
I'm going to add one more thing to that about the government announcing the other day about gas still within the long-term vision. So I think for anyone in the construction industry, built environment at the moment, you've really got to question, the series of people that have led up to your briefing stage as to what their stance is going forth, including gas, as we are trying to adopt more electrification, because I think you're going to see a lot of people get caught up as they're developing the briefs, or there's not going to be the finances that were promised by government or, the private sector. And I know that the government is, I think it was their green paper, they specifically said that they're relying on private investment to really fuel the decarbonisation of SA's economy, which is putting a lot of pressure on everyday Australians to make the right decision. But if you're not empowering the owners with the right information in the first place, and at least taking that step or that bit of accountability, we're going to be left with a whole legacy of buildings that just haven't met the targets by the right date.
Thank you very much for that question as well, because it does kind of go in this this back and forth, which is around what responsibility does private entities have, whilst what do the public entities have, and are we going to be playing by the same ball game? So yeah, it is to be seen on if federal and state governments will be holding themselves to the same rigorous reporting, which would be really nice, because it's generally the sustainability section of annual reports are getting much better and better. It's much easier to read and to really see if organizations are holding it to a T across any sort of sector. Just gonna wrap up at the moment. So thank you very much, everyone who contributed with questions and helped round out our conversation here. But we did talk about lots of different aspects. Really enjoyed all of your perspectives, so thank you very much. But of course, we talked about winning. But what is the actions that you feel that a lot of us in this context? There's a lot of different things that we've touched upon. But what are, from your aspect or your perspective, some action points that people can kind of take away from tonight?
I think from a practice based, from the conversations that I have, are that because we need to transition the design process very quickly, like as quickly as electrification, practices really need to get onto their B Corp or something. Even if you don't go through with B Corp, there's so much in there that can actually position your business into a new, service offering or something like that, which also then ties into the social values and the SDG goals as well. So that would probably be a major step from a practice point of view. But then for members individually is not to be afraid of admitting what you don't know and asking for it. If you don't ask, you don't get. So, if whether it's from the Institute of Architects, whether it's, one of these guys, there's so many people in the network that are trying to do this. And again, like if the private sector is to help the transition, then we've got to be open to talking, not just hiding behind emails, just have a conversation. Not be afraid to be out there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ruth. Deb?
I think my thought about what we can all do is a similar vein about talking. I think just asking questions all the time, and I suppose being brave enough to ask difficult questions and make sometimes challenging suggestions. I often say to the team at D Squared, don't be afraid to say what you think the right thing is that we should be considering. And it might not work on every project. Like every project doesn't have the budget or the time, but maybe it sticks, and maybe the next project it will happen. And keep asking questions, and we'll get there together.
Thanks, Deb. Lena?
Electrification. That's like, if you can do one thing for the environment, is electrify anything at home, in your buildings, in your public schools, whatever you can influence that. That's gonna mean we are able to power, especially in South Australia, everything with renewable
That's
energy.
right, South Australia. Whoop whoop.
Go Australia. Go South Australia. Yes. No, New South Wales is not doing that well. But even then, we know that electrification is the pathway that is going to get us to a more green grid, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks, Lena.
And from a site perspective, from construction, it's really a kind of a change management piece. How can we reframe the view that sustainability is not a deprivation? It's a value add. It's a positive. It's a chance to innovate, like create a different way of doing something. So very much like we do in design, we do in safety. How can we build things better? Sustainability can be a motivator to invent and do new things better.
Indeed. Awesome. Could you all join me in thanking our wonderful panel for their fantastic insights and just sharing their time with us today. And once again, thank you all for coming along, for your interest in this particular topic, and also hopefully taking some of those actions into your own world. Once again, I just want to, in rounding out, be able to shout out the NAWIC team. Anyone in the NAWIC team or a member of NAWIC, could you please stand up? The real NAWIC people, please stand up. Yeah, thank you so much. Got to make sure we give the shout outs to you all. Thank you very much for this collaboration. And like I mentioned, I hope it's just a stepping stone to more, so we can continue to engage with really important people across the industry. And also, of course, the real ASBNers, please stand up. Where y'all at? Where y'all at? Shout out, shout out, shout out. Maybe they're out in, where's, oh my goodness. We also have Christina and Renee around. Maybe they're just at the bar, which, by the way, y'all all can go back to. And if there's food out there, please make sure you take a bit. We do like to stand on principle and try to be zero waste. So if you don't eat it, you're giving me and Ben a really hard task. But thanks again. I hope you all have a fantastic evening, and we hope to see you soon in the future. Have a good one.